So in this autumn term, there's some Sundays where we're kind of kicking off that life group stuff. And then interspersed with that, we're doing this little series on Abraham and Jacob, these two ancient figures from the beginning of the Bible. And we're looking at them and we're thinking about their lives, learning about their lives with God as well. And I think it'd be really fun because they're great stories, really interesting stories. That sound all right? Good. Okay, but first of all, I want to start with two different things. I want to start with the ancient Chinese game called Go, and I want to start with AI. Okay? Is that all right? So who knows the Chinese game Go? So it's about 2,500 years old. It's thought to be the board game that's been played consistently longest than any other board game in the world. About 46 million people worldwide know how to play Go. I am not one of them. I have heard that it's intensely difficult, much more difficult than chess, which I find hard enough. Can anybody actually play Go? Have you? Yeah. Oh, yes. I saw a hand. It might have been wiping a nose. I'm not sure. It might be that there's somebody here who knows how to play Go, but we're not sure. Have you seen it? It's a board game with lots of little stones on it, white ones or black ones. No? No, okay, anyway, Go. It's called Go. And it's for a long time been the holy grail for people doing AI because they figure, no, computers will never be able to play this really complicated game. Apparently, I can't quite believe this, but apparently there are more configurations of the Go board game than there are atoms in the universe. So it's been this holy grail, like how on earth could we ever get computers to play this game? Anyway, somebody set up this program called AlphaGo. They obviously put a lot of thought into the name. And it was set up to play this Chinese board game, Go. And first of all, it taught itself. And so they gave it 100,000 old games of Go to kind of watch what was going on. And then the computer program played itself again and again and again until they got to a point where they said, okay, I think we know what we're doing now. And so then they brought the Go Grandmaster into the room to play the AI program. Okay, so it's a big moment. Is this going to work? Have we been able to write a program that can actually play this game? And so the game goes on and on and on. And then they get to move 37 in the game, okay? And everybody who knows Go knows, this is a significant moment. They can see what's happening because move 37, the computer program, AlphaGo, has a choice between two things, two different moves it could make, okay? And whichever move it's going to make is going to reveal its hand for the rest of the game. It's going to show what its strategy is going forward. And the option is the computer can make a move which is a very offensive move, okay, so shows it's going to play the game aggressively, try and gain territory from the other player, from this grandmaster, or it can make a defensive move, okay, so it's going to sit back and be more responsive in the way that it plays. Everybody who knows the game knows, this is that moment where we see what the computer program is going to do, and that will determine the rest of the game. Well, do you know what the computer program did? The offensive move or the defensive move? Neither. It made a third move. Everybody in the room thought, we knew it didn't know what it was doing. It's made a silly mistake. Apart from the Grandmaster. The Grandmaster stood up, went out of the room, eventually came back looking quite shaken because he'd realized something new had happened in the game. In over 1,000 years, nobody had ever made this move. But in the end, AlphaGo won. In fact, won 4 out of 5 games of the Grandmaster, and the Grandmaster retired from competition. What allowed an AI program to devise this new move? Well, perhaps that the computer had learned from scratch. It had had no coach. It had had no human intervention. It was not working from any particular traditions or expectations. It hadn't learned how to properly play Go. It wasn't held back by any particular conventions or ways of doing things. And it saw what no human had seen before. And it created what no human had created before. It was able to do something completely new. I find that story quite stirring, oddly. I'm not really a fan of AI, but I find that story quite stirring. Do you find it stirring? Not necessarily. Okay, maybe. So it seems to me that the most wonderful advances in human history happen when someone is able to lay aside some of their traditions, some of the expectations others might have of them, and do something new. And in that situation, the other people around them might be saying, we've never seen that happen before. That's not how we do it. And that person will be saying, well, it's time to try then. And that, it seems to me, is what Abraham is like. Abraham has this incredible impact on the life of the world because he says yes to something new, to something risky and impossible. And of course, Abraham doesn't say yes because he has faith in AI. He says yes because he has faith in God. He has faith in the God who is always doing new things and good things in his cosmos. And so in the Bible, Abraham is celebrated again and again in lots of different ways because he risked himself for something new. He risked himself on the God of hope, the God of life, the God of new beginnings. Abraham was able to step out in faith and say, what if this is really God who's calling me? He tried it and he saw that it was God, and he saw the new things that God was doing. He saw new creation. So as we start in this little series looking at Abraham and Jacob, I want to encourage you to step away from some of the assumptions that you have about yourselves and that you have about the world and how the world works. And instead, we might follow Abraham in making new steps in faith and new steps in hope and new steps in life. As we think about Abraham this morning, there's three ways I want to think about him, and each of them begin with an M. So I'm proud to say this is a three-part sermon, and each of the three words begin with M. That happens very rarely around here. I was chuffed about it. So I want to think about Abraham the migrant, Abraham the mediator, and Abraham the model. Okay? Abraham the migrant, Abraham the mediator, and Abraham the model. So Abraham, we heard the beginning of his family story from the end of chapter 11. Abraham was born in Ur of the Chaldeans, and most scholars now think that that's a town that's now called Nasiriyah. And it's on the Euphrates River, southeast of Baghdad in Iraq. Incidentally, it happens to be the point in Iraq that the coalition forces in the First Gulf War, that's the point they got to. That's as far as they got into Iraq. So it's that point there, okay? And this chap, Terah, has three sons, Abraham and Nahor and Haran. Haran gives birth to Lot, father's Lot, but dies pretty soon after. Abraham and Nahor, we are told, marry, but then we're also told that Abraham's wife, Sarai, is childless, okay? So you meet this family at the end of chapter 11, and we're actually given very little detail about them. The only detail we're given is their names, and then these two great sadnesses, that Haran had died very young and that Abram's wife Sarai is childless. And I wonder, because we're not given any other detail, it then tells us that Terah gathers everything he has, gathers his family and leaves for a new land, leaves in hope of a new life. I wonder if those two things are related, because we're told so little. I wonder if they're related. I wonder if his leaving was something to do with these two great sadnesses in his family. They travel, them and everything they've got, and they travel to Haran. And now this Haran's got two R's, okay? So there was Haran who died, and then there's Haran the place, and this Haran's got two R's. We now think that's the town called Urfa in Turkey, modern-day Turkey, quite near the border with Syria. Eventually, Terah dies, and then we get to chapter 11, which is the famous bit of Abraham's story, where God comes to him and says, go, I want you to take up the journey that your father started. I want you to make your way to Canaan, to this new land. And Abraham does the same. He's obedient, he's faithful, he gathers his wife and his family. He also takes his nephew, Lot. He obeys God, and they travel to this new land. And then they arrive there, and we heard some of the detail that he potters around different places, sets up an altar, different things, that sort of thing. And then they experience famine in the land. Did you hear that bit there? And so there's not enough to eat, and so they need to travel down to Egypt and find some more food there. And then there's the odd bit of the story that I got Joy to read, thank you very much, where Abraham and Sarai and their family, they get to Egypt, and then Abraham concocts this funny story, this sort of half-truth about Sarai as his wife. And when that comes to light, they get deported from Egypt. They get sent back to Canaan. So those are the things going on, yeah? Yeah? You've got a sense of what's going on in that story. And as I was reading it again this week, I love these stories, but it came to me afresh that how similar is Abraham's experience to the experience of modern-day migrants, to people who also pick up everything of their lives and move themselves to a new place, who travel to a different place, who travel for the dream of a better life, who move themselves in hope of survival and in hope of security and in hope of a new livelihood. As I say, I love the story of Abraham, but if I've been looking at it this week, I found it difficult to get a handle on who he is and what he's thinking, what he's doing, why he's acting in the way he is. And I wonder, maybe that's because my life is so different from Abraham. There's some of the instructions for worship a bit later in the Bible, in the book of Deuteronomy. There's some instructions about bringing harvest offerings to God in praise. And the people are to remember their story as they bring their harvest offerings. That, they're settled, they're farming. They bring this stuff, but they're to remember their story by saying, my father was a wandering Aramean. My father was a wandering Aramean. It's talking about Abraham. They're remembering that Abraham was this nomadic person who moved around in order to feed his flocks and his herds. Can you imagine that coming to worship saying, my story is wandering people. My story is migrant people. And my father was not a wandering Aramean. My father was an accountant. Which, as I say, that sounds a bit like he's dead, but he's not. He's just retired. That's why he's not an accountant anymore. My story is different from Abraham. It made me think, as I'm looking at this passage here, maybe I'm the wrong preacher this morning. Maybe we should ask somebody who's a migrant to come and unpack this story of Abraham, because somebody who's a migrant is going to understand much better what's going on here. Somebody who's a migrant is going to know what it means to have to leave your home, or to have to depend on the hospitality of strangers, or to arrive somewhere not knowing how you're going to be received, worrying that you're going to feel like you're a burden or you're a threat to someone else. Abraham moved during famine. He feared for his life because of cultural differences. He was expelled from the land where he'd received food. He understood interracial tensions. He understood being scapegoated. He understood moral panic. And aren't those all realities for modern day migrants? Now, I'm not therefore saying that Abraham is exactly the same as a modern day migrant, because of course the world is a different place. But also more than that, Abraham didn't just move because of physical pressures like famine. He moved because he was called. He was called by God. God promised him land. God promised provision for him and his family and his clan, the great nation that they become. And yet, doesn't this story resonate with the migrant experience today? And when we're talking about migration and asylum and all those things, lots and lots, I've especially been aware of it in the last few weeks. And when we hear people talking in public, politicians speaking, I think expressing opinions which feel to me more and more inhumane, it's helpful to turn to the Bible and remember that migration is not a new thing. Migration is a very, very ancient thing. And actually migration has shaped human civilization over millennia and will continue to shape human civilization. I want to suggest to you that maybe we are all migrants. In fact, that's true in lots of ways, but it's also true because we're spiritual children of Abraham, aren't we? Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. Are you with me? I am one of them, and so are you. So let's all praise the Lord. Right hand. And so on. So I suggest that we are all migrants because we're all spiritual children of Abraham. The greatest truth of me isn't that my father's an accountant. The greatest truth of me is my father is also a wandering Aramean. So, as Christians, we might be uncomfortable about some of the political debate that's going on at the moment. And I think we might be uncomfortable because, in fact, the Bible would be a completely different story if some of the people who want to be in power at the moment were in power of Egypt 3,000 1,500 years ago, wouldn't it? Do you know, if Abraham hadn't received help and hadn't received some kind of welcome? Now, I'm not meaning to say that issues of migration and asylum and all those things, which are going to be increasingly pressing issues, are simple. I'm just saying, rather than just taking the lead from the political world, we need to read our Bibles and see what our Bibles say about those things. And actually, we'll find that our Bibles gives us varied and nuanced accounts of what migration means. And they also show us that God cares for all people. And even that God calls some people to leave their lands for new lands of new promise and new blessing. So I encourage you to lean into your Bible as we navigate the ways in which the world is changing at the moment. Is that all right? 3 M's, that was the longest one, okay? So just to give you a little bit of hope. Abraham's not just a migrant, he's also a mediator, okay? So first of all, God promises these amazing things to him, gives him this incredible calling, and then there's this unexpected move that God makes, like the unexpected move in the Go game. God has this opportunity to show, is he primarily going to be make an offensive move on the world, or is he going to make a defensive move on the world? Actually, he shows rather than attacking other people or defending his own people, God is deeply invested in the welfare of all people, of people from every tribe and every tongue. It's at the end of the promises. Let's read it again, chapter 12. Now the Lord said to Abraham, go from your country and from your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Okay? So when God encounters Abraham at the beginning of chapter 12 of Genesis there, it's like this unimaginably generative event. God takes this placeless family and he promises them security and peace and provision and home. What wonderful promises those are. But then let's just notice that the most significant part of the promise, the most radically new part of the promise, comes at the end, where God says, Abraham, you don't just receive blessing from me, you also mediate blessing to others. You don't just receive good from me, you also seek the good of all of the people around you too. All peoples will be blessed through you. I want to suggest to you that it's so radical that we still haven't got our heads around it. We still haven't got a handle on quite how deeply that impacts on every part of life. We still tend to think we need to put a lot of energy into protecting our family and our clan and our people against those others out there. But in fact, God is saying, I will bless those others through you. I will bless all the people of the earth through you. Even those who call themselves your enemies, I will eventually bless through you. And of course, Jesus takes it one step further and says, love your enemies. And as we hear that this morning, you may be thinking, but hang on a minute, if we did that, all of those other people would take advantage of us. But actually, that's in the promise too. God says, no, I'm going to deal with those who curse you. That's not your battle to fight. I'm going to do that on your behalf. So imagine yourself at this point in world history. You know, humanity's moved on from hunter-gathering. We've got these nomadic, semi-nomadic people, and then people more and more are beginning to settle in permanent homes, and not just with flocks and herds, but planting, growing, farming the ground too. And as they do that, there's larger communities being built up, towns and cities. And maybe you're aware of, they've got better land, they've got more fertile land than we have. Or somebody comes after you and says, no, we want to live where you live. And there's this kind of increasing potential for warfare, for fighting over land, over provisions. But God says, I'm giving the world a new way of living, which isn't about fighting each other, but it's about being a source of blessing to each other. You don't need to defend yourself against people who are different from you. Instead, you should wish and work for their flourishing and for their well-being. You shouldn't see others as threats or as competition, but you should see their potential. Because in fact, you are going to mediate God's blessing to them. So beyond the offensive or the defensive approach to the world, God gives us this new way, which is the way of love. And that's the radical thing that he gives to Abraham, and through Abraham he gives to us. There's this wonderful book by Thomas Cahill, who's an Irish journalist, called The Gifts of the Jews. Does anybody know that book? No, okay. So it's called The Gifts of the Jews, and then it's got a wonderful subtitle. I love it when a book has a little title and then a wonderful subtitle. So it's called The Gifts of the Jews, How a Tribe of Desert Nomads Changed the Way Everybody Thinks and Feels. Isn't that great? The author, Thomas Cahill, he's recording this incredible impact on the whole of civilization that the Jewish people have had. This impact that they've had mostly for good, being a great blessing to the nations. The way that the Jewish people have mediated new ways of thinking and living to the rest of civilization, ways that are imbued with God's blessing. And Cahill traces lots of that back to this one moment, this one move that God makes, where God says to Abraham, I'm making you a mediator of blessing. I'm making you responsible for the well-being of strangers. You see, God chooses Abraham for the sake of all people. God draws Abraham into his plan for his creation, his cosmic purpose, which is that all people and all things would be brought back into relationship with him and would be blessed through him. As the story unfolds in the next few chapters of Genesis, we get to see Abraham in relationship with all of these others around him, all of these people outside of his clan. And the writer of Genesis is wanting us to see, is Abraham going to bless those people, or is he going to be a curse to them? And so we've already seen Abraham in contact with Egypt, but then also with other Near Eastern nations. There's a little bit where we see him with the king of Jerusalem too. And then we've got Hagar and Ishmael, who symbolize the outsider, and we see how he treats them, and then his concern for Sodom and Gomorrah. All of these places, the stories we're asking, is Abraham going to do this? Is he going to mediate blessing to the others around him? And we're shown all of those episodes in Abraham's life, because the truth is that how we get along with those who are different to us is central to the gospel. And this idea of mediating blessing to others is a radical new way. Okay, so Abraham the migrant, Abraham the mediator, and finally then Abraham is our model, because Abraham gives us and models to us new ways of living with God in the world. Abraham inspires faithful obedience. Abraham inspires us to live in radical inclusion. Abraham dares us to be like him. And so we read the story of Abraham, not just because it's interesting, but because it stirs us. It stirs us to go on our own journeys with God for the sake of the world. Abraham models for us this vibrant relationship with God, who's always doing something new. Abraham shows us that God will build his kingdom with imperfect people like Abraham and his family, and imperfect people like us. It shows us this God who is constantly wanting to bless, who's working and willing for the good of his creation. And Abraham is the model who helps us to believe and to see that it is worth risking everything to obey God. It's worth leaving what's familiar. It's worth leaving what feels secure. It's worth leaving some established ways of thinking and feeling and acting. It's even worth leaving and traveling to the other side of the world if God is calling you to do those things. You see, our faith in God is like this great adventure. It's not necessarily easy, but it will always stretch us. And as we adventure, as we follow, as we travel with God and in God, we will find deep and profound blessing in it. A blessing for us, and also blessing for all of the people God puts around us. Perhaps even our enemies. I wonder how Abraham knew that God was calling him. Do you know, it's recorded so simply. God said, go, and Abraham went. But I wonder how he knew. Was it a voice, an audible voice? Was it words written in the clouds? Was it some kind of prompting? Was it some of these pressures on him? Was it circumstance? And how is God calling you? How is God trying to get your attention at the moment? Are you open to the way that he might be stirring you, speaking to you? Are you making time to be open to him? Is God trying to move you on in your thinking or in your actions? Or is he showing you afresh who it is you're called to be a blessing to? Or do you feel this morning like you might be stuck in a rut, going around the same things? Is God coming to give you a hand, to pull you out, to move you on? What might God be asking you to step out into? What might he be asking you to leave or to risk? How might he be stretching your faith at the moment? And we get to leave, we get to follow, we get to go with God, just like Abraham. Because this God is the God who promises to speak life and blessing into his world again and again. We follow because this is the God who honors faith and honors obedience. We follow because this is the God who helps us see and do new things. We follow because the unknown things that God is inviting us into will be greater than the familiar things he's asking us to leave. What I've been struck with as I've read this story of Abraham again this week is that God really does want us to be more than we are. And he wants us to be more than we are for the sake of the people around us, because we're called to mediate his blessing to them. Is God inviting you, like Abraham, to leave some familiar things in order to make room for the new things that he's going to do in you? I mean, that's, again, the question at the heart of the gospel, isn't it? The gospel is about leaving the familiar, turning away from some things in order to embrace God. Is God inviting you now to leave some familiar things in order to make room for the new things that he's doing in you and that he's going to do in you?